Okay, this video is meant to inspire discussion. No arguments, no debates. As many of you may know, I'm a very opinionated person. I don't often share many of the same or similar opinions and viewpoints other people have. I am more on the negative or pessimistic side of DC's future, along with Warner Brothers. I know there are a lot of people who share that opinion, and I know there are a lot of people who don't. Obviously, with this video being centered around Zack Snyder, it's hard to even say his name without having people jump at you and hate you. But it's just a genuine question where conversation can be had. I want to know how many of the people who watch me now and how many new viewers I might get from this video, if you are interested in any way, any capacity of Zack Snyder coming back and working on DC again, more than likely to finish off his storyline of films. In my personal opinion, I'll just tell you this right now, I would love to see Zack Snyder come back and finish off his story. Do I think it's likely to happen? No, not in any way. Especially when you have James Gunn in charge. He would never want to threaten what he's doing with what Zack Snyder could do if he came back. The DCEU under James Gunn, and honestly, I don't care who it would be under, because we're in a situation where it could be 10 years already into its plan, or 15 years, and we would still, at the very least monthly, get articles and headlines that do describe a possibility of Zack Snyder one day coming back to DC and finishing his story. That type of stuff can get annoying, and even for me, someone who loves what Snyder was doing with DC, it becomes a little too much. But there's really only one entity that can be blamed for this entire situation: Warner Brothers. You can sit here and say that the problem rose with Zack Snyder and it ends with Zack Snyder. Even people who really dislike James Gunn and are not looking forward to what his DC universe is going to be like, you can say the problem rose with James Gunn and it ends with James Gunn. At the end of the day, even though we are on all different sides and spectrums of the DC fan base, the only villain here is Warner Brothers. It's been started by Warner Brothers, and it one day has to end with Warner Brothers, a company who has now just broke a 60% chance of bankruptcy rate. And you know, with Rebel Moon really ramping up right now and having all of this discussion about what he would do with DC, it does pretty much seem like no matter what Zack Snyder does, he will never be able to escape the DC conversation. It really feels like a situation that even 100 years from now, people will still be talking about Zack Snyder's stint with DC. Whether you like his movies for DC or don't, people still talk about it so much today. Every single day for the past couple of months, it just feels like there's so much back and forth. Zack Snyder says he's done with DC, never coming back. Zack Snyder says never say never. James Gunn says that he's talked to Zack Snyder and he has absolutely no interest in coming back. This article over here says that Zack Snyder wants to eye a return to DC. This article says that it's never gonna happen. It always seems like one day's a no, one day's a maybe, and then there's one day that's like, just you wait, it's gonna happen. It's pretty much confirmed, we just don't know it yet. It's all over the place. I mean, we did get confirmation from the CEO of Netflix where if they could license out Zack Snyder's Justice League and stream it on their platform, they absolutely would. And that does not mean that Zack Snyder would now get to work on his DC movies, but a company like Netflix whose stock is sitting above $400 and Warner Brothers stock who sits at $10, I would not put it past Netflix in some way trying to ask Warner Brothers to at least borrow the IP of DC. But then the one confirmation you always need to know if someone is interested in doing something or not is literally from the literal person in question. Where Zack Snyder did say the other day in an interview for Rebel Moon that, yeah, if Netflix did have the IP in any way of DC characters, he would absolutely continue his DC story. We just need to be realistic about this stuff. What are the chances that Warner Brothers would ever license out an IP like DC to another studio? So then you could potentially have another studio who might handle the DC IP better than Warner Brothers can. They don't want to admit to that, and they would rather not see that happen. Also, DC's kind of a package deal, man. If you want DC, you're gonna have to take Warner Brothers too, which honestly could very likely be a possibility come this summer or anywhere within the year for Warner Brothers, as I do believe they are going to be getting sold. We could sit here all day and debate what Zack Snyder did with his trilogy of films. Were they the right calls? Were they the right moves to make? And people can sit here and say, yes, it was perfect, or no, it was terrible. But film, just like any other art form out there, is subjective. It's going to be liked by some, disliked by others. It's going to be loved by some and hated by others. That's just how the world works. And what did Warner Brothers expect to happen when they completely shut down a director and a loyal fan base, or just in general, people who liked his movies, from ever happening again? What did Warner Brothers think would happen when they segregated a piece of the fan base, and they still do to this day? You spend your hard-earned money to go watch these movies, to then get invested into the storyline, to have these visuals and spectacles pop out to the screen to you, to have enjoyment and excitement, to see these actors and actresses take on these roles in movies you enjoy. And then because Warner Brothers gets terrified of the 200 people on Twitter who, for whatever reason, don't like it because it's not how they would have done things, they ruin it for everybody. I said this in a stream a couple weeks ago about art being subjective. Who are you to tell me that my interpretation on these characters and the interpretations that I like from these characters are wrong? My favorite Superman movie of all time and my second favorite comic book film of all time is Man of Steel. And why do I feel that way? Because that is the movie that got me interested in Superman. Prior to that movie, I thought Superman was extremely boring, and I had absolutely no interest ever getting to know his character until that movie came out, and it changed absolutely everything for me. I now have a deep and fond appreciation for the character, where I can also appreciate other versions of Superman, but at the end of the day, I owe everything to Man of Steel, making me a fan of the very first superhero character ever created in history. If you are a fan of these films, how many times have you had to hear, if you like anything Zack Snyder has made, you're not a real comic book fan. You don't actually understand these characters. Those are very lazy excuses. Those are the excuses coming from people who either A, have absolutely no substance of anything to say, or just simply do not like his films because he didn't make the films based off of their specific liking. And it's not hidden anymore. There is a very blatant hatred for Zack Snyder in the industry today, and even was 10 years ago. I mean, his Rebel Moon reviews are coming out right now, and as if anyone even pays attention to Rotten Tomatoes, since they are a fraudulent company. We have these professional reviewers coming out and giving it the worst grades possible just to spite him, just to spite this Snyder fan base that exists because they were done wrong and not give him the conclusion of his story as anybody else in the world would have reacted to their favorite director who never got to finish off their story for a popular IP. This behavior of fans is not unique for Snyder, because I can tell you right now, if James Gunn got 3 movies deep and then Warner Brothers decided to pull the plug, you would absolutely have a restore the Gunverse from his loyal fans and followers. It's just the fact that it has particularly started with Zack Snyder. There is a clear negative bias towards the man, and if you can't see that, I suggest you just quickly go online and look anywhere, you'll find it. And to see this and to defend Zack Snyder, this doesn't mean you have to like every single movie the guy made. Just because you're a fan of his work and you're a fan of what he was doing for DC, and you would be supportive of him to continue, doesn't mean you have to love everything he's done. I'm not a fan of Sucker Punch. I don't think it's that good of a film. I don't like Army of the Dead. I think it's a very mediocre movie. And who knows how I'm gonna feel about Rebel Moon. I could absolutely love it. I could dislike it. I could maybe even come out of that movie ending up being like, this is awful. But there is one thing I do know above all of that. I absolutely love what he did for me with Superman. I absolutely love what he did for me putting Batman and Superman on the big screen together. I love what he did for me putting the Justice League on screen together for the first time in history in a 4-hour epic that puts the ignorant Warner Brothers and Joss Whedon cut of the movie to complete shame. When I first came out of Batman vs. Superman, I came out of the theater really loving that movie. I saw that film 4 times in theaters, and I think about the 3rd time I went to go see it, I started to find some inconsistencies and some problems. And whose fault is that? Once again, guys, the villain. Like Snyder, dislike Snyder, like his movies, don't like his movies, the villain is Warner Brothers. Because there's a half an hour of that movie missing, which infinitely makes that film better. But I'll never forget what I said to my friends, to my family, and people I knew about that movie as the weeks went on and the reviews got worse. I said 10 years from now, this movie would be looked at far differently, and it would be appreciated a lot more than it currently is right now. And what are we, about 7-8 years later, and you now start to see a lot of people who did not like the movie before coming around and saying, I actually really like this film now. It's not as bad as I remember. Or you're now seeing people who never watched it when it came out and they're watching it today and they're realizing, whoa, this movie is effing awesome. I came across a video of a couple watching Batman vs. Superman for the very first time, and by the end of the movie, absolutely loving every minute of it. And then I was curious. I typed in the search bar, Batman vs. Superman reactions. Pages and pages and pages of people reacting to this movie within the span of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, all coming to the conclusion of, whoa, this movie is really good. And you could say, well, hey, those aren't real comic book fans, as a lot of people for some reason love to use that reason. Good for them. It doesn't matter, because a vast majority of people who watch these movies are not comic book fans. They're the general audience. But I'll also play a little bit of devil's advocate here and say, why would I want Zack Snyder to return to DC and potentially Warner Brothers to finish off his DC story? Because I'm going to be completely honest with you here. He looks like he is having the time of his life over at Netflix. He looks like he's being given the freedom to do as he pleases, to do whatever he wants. He's being given the time and the money. He is clearly appreciated over there. Whereas over with Warner Brothers, he was never appreciated. And look what they did to him. So would I really want him to return to this poverty studio? No, probably not. I mean, if there was this 1 in a million chance where the studio invited him with open arms to continue, I'd be like, bravo, that man deserves it. This is going to be really cool to see how it all ends. But for his sake, for his health, for his mentality, maybe you don't want to go back there. Because I don't see many people, if not no people at all, jumping to go work for Warner Brothers. And because this fan base is so divided, we see a lot of people who are really disappointed that his story's never going to continue. Or we see a lot of people who are happy that it's never going to happen. Often I see a lot of people ask the question, if the Batman can exist in Elseworlds and Joker can exist in Elseworlds, why is Zack Snyder's DC not allowed to exist in Elseworlds while James Gunn creates a new DC universe? It is because Zack Snyder's story would threaten anything James Gunn is doing. Even for the people who hate Zack and hate his movies, they hate what he does, would likely still focus more on what Zack is doing than Gunn, because people who talk negatively about something gets people more interested. They're more likely to click on negativity than they are on positivity. But I feel like what you could easily have just done is allow Zack to finish off his story for those people who really wanted to see it completed, while James Gunn sits in the background and works on his new DCU reboot. At least with that situation, Warner Brothers wouldn't be as much of a hated company because they're still giving a lot of the fans and general audience what they want, instead of James Gunn rebooting a DC universe while the DCEU is still going on, only giving us about a year of a break. You could have simply just allowed Zack to finish off his story, which only had 2 more movies involved, and then you would have given James Gunn more time to work on what he needs to work on. I mean, I'm not too much of a James Gunn fan. I'm not overly fond of the stuff he's made in the comic book genre and outside of the comic book genre. And even though I have talked about a lot of my heavy doubts about him moving forward, I'm still keeping my mind open enough to give him a chance, because we truly never know what he can accomplish. But as for someone like myself, who loves every movie Zack gave to us for DC, who loves the plot points of the character, the visual beauty of the movies, and where he was taking this story with only 2 movies left to go, I will always defend Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and his Justice League cut. I will always defend myself in why I like these movies so much and why I like this story. At the end of the day, with how divided the DC fan base is today, with what Warner Brothers has done to all of us, you're gonna have your Snyder fans, you're gonna have your James Gunn fans, you're even gonna have the Matt Reeves fans, you're gonna have people in all corners who like their own things and now are just so disconnected from one another that they can't have conversations with each other anymore. You're gonna have a ton of people from all of these separate DC fan bases who take things a little too extreme, they go too far, they say terrible things, they act terribly. There's even people on Twitter who have a big fan base, a big following, who are considered one of those extremists, whether they be against Snyder, for Snyder, against Gunn, for Gunn, whatever other corner of DC you want to talk about. But that's not the point of this. This isn't to get people mad, to call you out, and to make you feel stupid for not liking what I like or what the next guy likes. A big part of my channel, what I wanted it to be, was to bring everybody together where we can love stuff like this, but also discuss and converse about stuff like this without getting mad at each other, without hating each other because we have a difference of an opinion. And really, as long as we can all be civil about this, you're valid. So with no judgment, speaking freely, how you truly feel. Would you like to see Zack Snyder continue his DC story one day? Or are you not interested? You guys know how I stand. I would absolutely love it. But that's the great thing about being on this channel, is that if you don't feel that way, I don't hate you or dislike you. We just see things differently. So go ahead in the comments below, guys, and let me know your feelings on this entire situation. But with that being said, that is all I have for you on this one, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.